Hello and welcome to Property Legacy, the podcast. We are back today with Sarah Savage and she is our guest. So we would love for you to introduce yourself and let us know who you are and what you do.
Hi, I'm Sarah Savage and I'm a residential landlord and tenant solicitor, which basically means that I represent mostly landlords, assisting them with naughty tenants.
Fabulous. And where do we actually meet you?
We met at your Manchester and North West networking event. I came to the very first one, I think.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Isn't it good what happens when we all get together and talk about property?
It's one of my favourite networking events because we just stand around talking and it's a bit more, you don't have to go and see things all the time and listen to speakers. So I do like coming to it. Plus, Worsley Old Hall is gorgeous. It's a beautiful venue.
It does help.
Yeah,
it does help
yeah.
if you get the venue right. But the purpose behind that networking was we were fed up of going to networking events where you had to sit, get talked at, sold something, and then you had about 10 minutes at the end just to chat. So that was the whole thing behind, we don't want to be sat listening to somebody talk, even though we could be one of the people talking. It's just one of those things.
Yeah.
But there's enough out there that people go and talk to get talked at.
Yes.
So in the realm of helping landlords with litigation or evictions and all that kind of stuff, what's the kind of main advice that you'd give a landlord before they actually rent the property out?
Before they rent the property out, is to use a solicitor to get your tenancy agreement drafted.
Yeah.
Don't download it off the internet. Don't try and do everything yourself. For me, if you don't get it right at the outset, that's when later, when you need to evict your tenant, you struggle because there'll be something missing from that tenancy agreement which would have massively helped you in doing that, which is not there. Or you've missed a massive step that you should have taken, because it's not just about getting your tenancy agreement right. Often it's about making sure you've given various documents to the tenant at the outset, which if you haven't done, then you might find at the end. I mean, it's very rare. Usually there's a way for a landlord to get their property back, but sometimes you can find yourself quite snookered. And so it's very important to get everything right at the beginning.
With our experience, if people are using Section 21 to get their house back, then you have to prove that you give all the right to rent stuff and all the information from the government, all the up-to-date ones on every renewal, and be able to prove it.
Absolutely.
And that's the issue. What we tend to find is people fail at that, and then luckily the Section 8 can come in because it's usually been over 2 months by the time they've gone to court, so then they can go down that route.
Yeah.
So what's your background before you came into this?
Yeah, so I always wanted to be a lawyer. I used to watch LA Law when I was a kid, and there's a picture of me when I was quite young with my dad's mate's barrister's wig on. And so I knew I wanted to do law from an early age, but I didn't realise in this country as well you have to be a solicitor or a barrister. So then I thought about which one of those I wanted to do, but the first thing you do is your law degree, so that was easy enough. I did that. And then I decided to be a solicitor. There was something about being a barrister that I thought, I mean, oddly, now I work for myself, but at the time I thought, I'll have to work for myself for my barrister, and I might have my weekend planned, and then a brief will land on my desk on Friday, and there goes my weekend. And I thought, being a solicitor, I'd be a bit more on the ground, I'd see the people a bit more. But I was going to do family law. I always wanted to do family law, but when I was qualifying, there'd been some massive cuts to legal aid in family law, so I was like, what am I going to do? So I just fell into consumer credit agreement work. And the thing is, housing, like whenever I did my law degree or my legal practice course, housing wasn't a module, it wasn't like I didn't even know what housing was. And for me, the main thing I wanted to do was litigate, and I knew I wanted to do civil litigation. I never wanted to do crime. That just didn't, I thought, what if I get somebody off who did do it, or what if I, don't, if they didn't do it, or if they did do it and I get them off, or they didn't do it and they go to prison forever. I was like, no, I can't handle that. So I knew I wanted to do civil law. And when I was in consumer credit, that must have been when the credit crunch hit, must have been like 2008. So then they were making redundancies in consumer credit, and there was a job in housing. So off I went. And then once I got into it, I just loved it. But when I started, I did legal aid and I represented tenants. So that was tough, you have to be, like people would come in on a Friday at 3 o'clock, they've been unlawfully evicted, and I couldn't leave the office until I'd found them in bed for the night, And I think for me, I did legal aid for a good 8 years, I would say. But the final straw, because you'd get them a suspended possession order. So often the reason the tenant would be evicted would be because they've been antisocial. They're causing all sorts of havoc in the neighbourhood, you know, arguments late at night. And you'd get them what's called a suspended possession order, where as long as they didn't keep behaving badly, they would get to stay in their home. And I'd be like, right, I don't want to see you ever again. And then they'd be on my door in 3 months' time. And I'd be like, you know. And then I think that the nail in the coffin was I had a client who had a donkey in the house, and they wouldn't rehome the donkey, you know. And it's like the roof over your head or the donkey, and they chose the donkey. And I just thought, I can't do this anymore. So I swapped sides, and I went to work for a private law firm that only dealt with housing association work, so representing the landlord, but specifically housing associations where eviction is very much the last resort. You're a bit like a social worker rather than a landlord. You've got to put a lot of support in place for the perpetrator as well as the victim, and you've got to show that you've tried everything before you've gone to evict them. So yeah, I never actually thought I'd ever represent private landlords. I kind of was a bit nervous about doing that, but then I became one, and I thought, well, you know, I'm not mean, I'm not horrible. I think landlords get quite a bad rap in the press, you know, even now. And really, I just wanted to help people. And I am still helping people. And I see landlords, you know, I had a client not so long ago, she had a brain tumour and she really needed to get her house back in order to sell it, to pay for medical care. And the tenant wouldn't leave, you know, and unfortunately her tenancy agreement might as well have been written on the back of a fag packet. I mean, there was just, you know, she was in quite a precarious, difficult position. She was not going to be able to use Section 21. So yeah, I think eventually I thought, well, no, I can go and represent private landlords and still feel like I'm, you know, doing good and helping people who need it. And then, yeah, but I worked in private practice my whole career, and I didn't even know this kind of setup existed, which is, so Bexley Beaumont are what you'd call like a hybrid law firm, where they set up and they provide the admin and the billing, but you work for yourself, you know. So yeah, so I'm now self-employed.
Isn't it funny, like, how you fall into things, though, like talking about your journey and, you know, what you expect when you kind of start on that journey and where you actually end up. It can be so circumstantial to the rooms that you're in, or like things that are happening in the public sector and things like that. And I think that's the funny thing about people that we're going out and meeting when we're doing these podcasts. The majority of people didn't wake up at like 16 and go, right, this is what I'm going to do and like pursue that career. And I think that's a really nice thing as well, like giving people the opportunity to talk about that process and that journey and like how you've got to where you are. But yeah, the donkey, oh, that's killing me. It's mental, it's crazy.
I have seen a lot.
I can imagine.
You know, I mean, the hoarding cases especially can be very interesting, you know, people collecting all sorts of weird and wonderful things,
Yeah. So how do you find, obviously you said you're a landlord yourself, how did you kind of fall into that?
Yeah, well, again, that was accidental, definitely. That was a case of buying my first house. I think when I was still a trainee solicitor, I think I split up with my boyfriend and I went home to live with my mum, and she put up with me for about 6 months, and then she said, you need to find somewhere else to live. So she got my dad round and they cobbled together about £5,000 and they gave that to me. Well, they didn't give it to me, actually, they lent it to me. I had to pay it back, and I did pay it back. So I bought this little house in Wigan, 2-bed, semi-detached, and I moved into that. And then I met, it's always a boy, isn't it? It's always a boy that like makes you do something else. I got with a guy, and so I moved into his house. I think I just had a lodger at first. Somebody I worked with, she needed somewhere to stay, so she stayed there. But then I was spending all my time at his, so she sort of became more of a tenant. And yeah, I mean, you know, it's really bad, but I didn't do everything the way I should have done it at the outset. You know, I've learned a lot, and I was a trainee solicitor at the time, so I wasn't even doing housing law. At that time, I was doing a lot in family, and so I didn't know what I know now, that's for sure. But yeah, that just became the easiest thing to do, really. And then, yeah, because I didn't even have it on like a buy-to-let mortgage. It was on a proper repayment. I mean, I asked the mortgage lender if I could do it, and I remember they said yes. And then I set it all up. I at least got a tenancy agreement. As it happens, my boyfriend at the time was a commercial property lawyer, so he could at least get hold of a tenancy agreement. And I set it all up, and then the bank said, oh, we didn't mean to say yes, you can't do that. And I was like, well, it's too late, I'm already doing it. But as soon as I could afford it, I got it onto a buy-to-let mortgage and obviously started doing everything correctly.
So you actually bought your first house using private investors and the mortgage?
Yeah.
So no money down, none of your money?
No, that is true, yeah, that is very true, yeah.
So there's a lot of people out there trying to do that every day of the week and failing miserably.
Yeah.
So you did one of the hardest things possible, is having an investor to help you buy your first house?
Yeah, I think I was looking, I mean, I suppose £5,000 wouldn't go very far now to buy a first house.
I don't know, we bought the house we live in for me and Debbie. That was a deposit of £5,000.
Yeah.
Because in Blackpool, you can still buy houses in that kind of range, you know. So it's still possible. Yeah. You don't need that much money.
No. Probably not in Manchester though.
Certainly not in the centre of Manchester. No,
it's amazing how much the city is like developing, and you know, really like there's an amazing things going on here. But like just the price of everything, it's like London.
Yeah.
Everywhere you go.
I don't think I'll ever be moving to Manchester. I think house prices are much more civilised in Chorley. But I did just help a tenant in London. He was living in the centre of London, and he'd paid a whopping £130,000 6 months upfront rent. The rent on that apartment was £5,000 a month.
Oh,
and I just thought, oh my goodness.
That's crazy. And I think obviously like a lot of people that we meet or that we kind of come across, they all do kind of fall into kind of accidentally becoming landlords. So like yourself, they get themselves in a situation and they just kind of fall into it. But half of them don't know that they need to actually go and get that advice from somebody and get, you know, speak to solicitors and put things in place. So I think it's really important to shed light on that, because lots of people just aren't aware. They just kind of want this quick fix and they go, oh, well, I'm going to get some money and all this stuff. But there's so much that needs to be done and a process that needs to go into it in order to make sure that you're following regulations and stuff like that. So what actually is that process if somebody's finding themselves in a situation, you know, if a family member's passed away, if something's been passed down to them and they've accidentally become a landlord, like what is that process? How does it actually look to make sure you're being compliant?
Yeah, I mean, that's massive, but I think if you inherit a property and it's already got a tenant in it, what you're hoping for is that the tenancy agreement confirms that the landlord is the landlord, and then anybody he assigns it to, or if he dies, inherits it. So you make sure you've got a clause in your tenancy that allows for, essentially for when that person dies, for somebody else to step into the shoes and just automatically become the new landlord, regardless of whether their name is on the tenancy, which then means if they do need to take steps to get the property back, they can do that. But also, if they transfer the property into their sole name, there are certain documents that they then need to file and serve on their tenants. Section 3 notice to say that the property's been transferred from one person to another, and you have to do that within the first 2 months of doing that. And if you don't, like some of these things as well, they are criminal offences. They do start to dip into criminal issues. But I suppose from my point of view, that never really comes up, because it's more what's going to provide the tenant with a defence to whatever claim you're bringing. And if you can't prove you're the landlord, that's quite a massive stumbling block, you know. So I get a lot of people who come to me where there's no written tenancy agreement, so they're panicking that there's no tenancy. But obviously, if they're paying you a rent and they're living in the property exclusively, then they are your tenant and you are the landlord. So there will be a way. But it might mean you have to prove the presence of a tenancy using different documents, like the office copy entry that proves you're the proprietor, and then like a rent statement that shows that they've been giving you money for the length of time they've been giving. So I think the important thing is, if you do end up in that situation, don't wait to see somebody. Go and see a solicitor as soon as you can and get some advice about the best way to do it. I mean, I'm on a lot of landlord forums on Facebook, and there's a lot of good advice on there, but I think too often there's a lot of conflicting, you know, advices, and I'm sort of going, no, that's wrong, you know, and I do go on there a bit now and try and help and advise. But I think the biggest thing I come across is people want to be able to verbally tell me what the problem is and then verbally get an answer, and I can't do that. What I need is to send you a massive list of every document I need to see, gather all that information in, and obviously the more information you can give me at the beginning, the more likely I'm going to be able to provide you with a coherent advice that explains to you, you know, what your options are, how you might be able to recover your house. And sometimes it might be a long process. Sometimes we might have to start at the beginning. We might want to get a proper tenancy in place, get all the paperwork in order, and so essentially sort of start again, which might mean the landlord has to wait, because certainly if you want to use a Section 21 notice, you can't do that until the first 4 months of the tenancy's lapsed. So sometimes it is about sort of trying to rewind, get it on a proper footing, and then, you know, and then move forward. So, yeah.
I think the issue is when you look online, all the information is there, but it looks very simple. All you do is you just notice, give it them 2 weeks later, they have to be out.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, but then what happens if they don't?
Yeah.
And then if you haven't done it properly, you haven't served it properly, and you haven't then done a form that's your evidence that you've served it. It's all this stuff that comes out in the wash when you actually go to court, and the magistrate turns around and goes, "Can you give me this form that you've signed to say you've handed it over?" And the landlord's standing there with his phone with a letter halfway through a door, and you can't tell what door that is. Or it's like, no, I don't want that. I just want the form that you signed to say you've done this.
A certificate of service. I love that, because clients send me everything. They send me a video, they send me, and I'm like, can you just sign this document to say that you went there and you handle it? And they're like, oh, is that all you need? I'm like, yeah, I don't need anything else. It's signed with a statement of truth, and that does it. But I will say that hand delivery is definitely the best method of service for my money. I prefer to do that if the client can do that. But yeah, I think a lot of people, when they see my fees to draft a notice, they're like, but the drafting of the notice takes 5 minutes. Section 21, like, to draft it is quite easy, but it's all the background work. You know, I need to make sure that everything is in order before they serve the Section 21. And usually there's a way to put yourself in a position to serve it. The only total bar at the moment, as the law stands, is if you didn't do the original gas certificate, or if you did do it, but you can't find it and you can't prove that you served it at the time.
And I think that things like that, one, are very difficult to then recover from. But it's also something that people don't know. Yeah, you need to look after. They think as long as they've got a current one, that's fine. Yeah. And it's like the government rental document you have to give.
The how to rent booklet.
Book, which gets updated quite
all
often.
The time.
And then every time you do a renewal, you have to then give them a new one, and it's so difficult getting old ones available.
It is. I mean, I can get hold of every copy, and I know where they all are, so that's good. But also, I had a case where so since 2015, October 2015 is when you've meant to start giving the how to rent booklet, and unfortunately he'd renewed the tenancy every year since then. So in order to protect his position, I served the tenant with every version of the how to rent booklet since 2015. So each tenant, there was 2 tenants as well, so they each got like a 70-page bundle of every version of the how to rent booklet. And sometimes when they renew it, it's just a slight typo, it's just a slight change. But in order to make sure they couldn't say they hadn't had the correct one. So it's just doing stuff like that. But it is kind of madness that. So, you know, the law in that sense has become a bit farcical, really. And I know a lot of private landlords don't want to see Section 21 go. But in many ways, it's such a convoluted mess that I think it might be preferable.
Well, the thing is, people say it's a no-fault eviction, which is fine. But if you still want to sell your property with the new regulations that are coming in, you can still do that. Yeah. If you want family to move in, you can still do that. Yeah. But it does take you away from that whole muddle of if you haven't got that pack done up front, you can't do this. Yeah. At least it gives you a bit more protection.
Definitely, and consistency. And the problem is with the Section 21 procedure is that all these defences have developed, and there's decisions all up and down the county court, court decisions, which aren't binding. But if one county court judge knows about that decision, they might use it. And some landlords, they might get a decision which is probably wrong. Like I've been hearing all sorts of things about cases being thrown out because the landlord's name and address wasn't on the gas safety certificate. So it's like, is the gas safety certificate valid? It's not just whether you've done it. Is it valid? Is it completely filled in? But unless somebody's willing to then take that to the Court of Appeal, for the Court of Appeal to say, well, no, we can't be saying that's a bar. You know, if they've done the gas safety and the house is safe, then surely that shouldn't be a bar to being able to use a Section 21. But until it gets to that point, it's a potential problem for my clients, and I have to rate, all I can usually do is say, this is the best position I can put you in to serve a Section 21. I think you'll be okay. You know, and often it also depends what the defendant might do. If the tenant doesn't do anything, you know, you'll probably be fine.
Yeah,
but
I think every landlord in the country goes to court hoping that the tenant doesn't turn
up.
Whatever happens, please don't turn up.
Yeah.
Because then shelter gets involved and all that, which is a good thing that shelter's there
for
the tenants.
Yeah.
But it does prolong the scenario and get stop the process going forward.
Yeah.
But it's funny the breathing space that's now starting to be used.
Yeah.
Have you had experience with that?
Do you know, I haven't actually. It hasn't really come up. I keep waiting for it to happen in my cases, but so far so good. It hasn't really.
So we have one landlord that we were looking after. We're not anymore, but he's now got his possession order.
Yeah.
And every time the eviction people turn up, it's got breathing space.
Right.
For a different reason every time.
Oh, really?
And then you can't go there for another 2 months.
Yeah.
And then it goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
And on. So it's something that we have to be a little bit wary of.
Definitely.
And I think in time that will be tightened up because quite often the bailiffs don't know that that's been agreed.
Right.
And then they have to go all the way to court to then double check it and then it causes for lots of problems. So we're kind of hoping that that'll be used properly and not just messing about.
Definitely, but so far I haven't come across it yet. Nobody's raised that as a defence to
perhaps it's just a Blackpool special.
Maybe. I will say though, like if the tenant is going to turn up, I'd rather they turn up with a solicitor. If they turn up in person, then that can be harder. But yeah, obviously best case scenario is that they don't turn up at all.
So obviously with you now being self-employed, what's your kind of like day-to-day like for you? Is it quite a similar kind of thing, or is it a little bit all over the place?
It can be a bit all over the place. This week I've done a lot of networking and this sort of stuff. So I've probably done less work, but it's all work, isn't it? I think changing that mindset's been the hardest thing.
Yeah.
And as solicitors, I think I mentioned earlier that we work in 6-minute units, and it's been quite hard to move myself away from that sort of mindset and relax. I mean, I was very lucky. By the time I left private practice, I was a partner. I could work from home when I wanted to. I did have quite a lot of autonomy, and I was never very good in the morning. Like I never really got to work for 9 a.m. I was usually there by about 5:30, and I was always waiting for somebody to say something so I could say, well, I was working really late last night, so it doesn't matter. But nobody ever did, because I was in an environment where I was trusted and they knew that I worked really hard. But I mean, I'm working really hard when you're in a private law firm. I managed a team. I did 12-hour days quite regularly, and I definitely don't work 12-hour days anymore, which is lovely.
Yeah.
But I think at the minute I'm sort of dealing with. I sort of feel stressed about not being stressed, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think you get so used to a certain way of working all the time and being at that heightened level that it has been a strange adjustment for me. But because I was networking quite late on whatever night it was this week, I lose track of my days more now as well. I don't necessarily know where I'm at. I slept in yesterday because then I knew I was coming to your networking thing last night. So I don't, but then like this morning, obviously I had to get up, so I got up, and I've got a dog and I have to walk my dog every day, so
I think it's nice being at a place though where you can open up that flexibility and be like, when you're managing your own time, it can be a blessing and a curse depending on what kind of day you're having or what's going on, but having that freedom to not be in that 9 to 5 slog of it and being like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to wake up later today because I'm networking tonight, and these are things that I'm doing, and there's still things that I'm doing for my business. It's not just sat in an office doing kind of the similar kind of pattern day in, day out. So it's a massive change though, going from corporate to going to self-employed.
It's definitely keeping me on my toes in a way that it didn't. And we are now as well. I've had a colleague join me here as well, so I am hoping to get back into the housing association work, which is quite exciting.
Oh, amazing.
Because obviously that's what I've been doing for the last 15 years, and it's a lot more involved, that work, than the private landlord work. Because actually, if you get the private landlord work right at the outset, the hearings are quite straightforward.
From your point of view, is it better to represent a private landlord that owns the property in their own name or in a company structure?
From my point of view, it doesn't make any difference. It's just consistency. It's just making sure that the landlord named on the tenancy is also the landlord named on the notice, and that they are the actual landlord. They don't necessarily have to be the owner. Obviously, if you've got a rent-to-rent situation, the owner can be very different from the landlord. Like say HMO, the landlord could be renting from the owner, so that's fine. But yeah, you just need to make sure everything's correct and not, that you've not put one name on one and another name on the other. And don't put your agent down as your landlord. And it's also very important to make sure your tenant has the landlord's address in England and Wales, and not necessarily just the agent's, especially if you're trying to recover your rent. But I did have a case where the agent was also the landlord, so obviously then that address is absolutely fine.
We have that scenario with our own properties. But it's just one of those things. But we do come across lots of tenancies that were written and signed by the agent. And it's a case, we need to set up a new tenancy. No, just keep the old one. It's like, it'll never work.
I mean, it's, obviously there are times where I only find out certain information, just before court. So it's just a case of, because obviously I can't mislead the court. If the judge said, does your landlord own this property, and I knew that they didn't, then I can't lie. But obviously if that's, I think I had a case, it just became apparent later on that it was the son that actually owned the property. That should have been the landlord really, but it was the parents who I was representing and said that they were the landlord, and it was their name on the tenancy. So sometimes it's a bit like, well, you have to just sort of say to the client, these are your options, these are the risks quite low, so do you want to just run with it and hope for the best? And for me, as long as I've advised that that's a potential risk, if they've decided to press ahead with it, then I'm more than happy to do that. And then once I know that, I'll argue as tooth and nail.
And I suppose with people trying to offload properties to the children, for, inheritance tax and all that kind of issues, they forget then to follow up with the rest of the paperwork to make sure it's all followed through.
Possibly.
It's something to be wary of.
I'm sure the probate solicitors at Bexley Beaumont have issues in relation to that quite a lot.
Well, just thinking, well, I sold it to my son for £1. Oh, right, okay. There's issues in that area.
Yes.
But so are you looking to expand your portfolio of one?
Yeah, we were talking about this, weren't we? I do want to. I mean, obviously I am busy. I'm a busy person, and I do love my job, especially now I've gone self-employed. I am really enjoying it. But yeah, it seems like a good place to invest my money. So at some point I will look to do it. But I feel like I've got a lot. So even though I go to a lot of networking, I mean, it's funny when I went self-employed, I thought, oh right, well, best go networking and meet other people, property people, and people who have tenancies and property. And I learned all sorts. So like my mortgage, for example, on my rental is still repayment. Like, I didn't even know you could get an interest-only buy-to-let mortgage. So it's amazing how much I've learned. But then every time I go to a talk, if somebody's talking about HMOs, I'm like, oh, I want to do HMOs. If they're talking about flipping bungalows, I'm like, oh, I want to do that. I feel like I can't quite decide what to do, and I need to sort of pick an avenue and go for it, really.
I think everybody that gets into property, they look at all the courses that are available, everything that's available online. It's where do you start? There's so many things that can overwhelm, and you need to have an idea of where to start and what to do first, and if you're doing a limited company, then get that set up first. Because that can take a while. If you need to sort anything out with HMRC, that can take a long time. Pension schemes and all that kind of stuff that people talk about on Facebook, and all the Facebook gurus are out there saying, oh, you can buy properties with your pension. But it took us 18 months to actually get the pension set up.
Oh, really?
Because it's HMRC said no at one point. So there's a lot to go on behind the scenes that you don't know about.
No.
And it's that theory to practice that's the hard thing.
It is. And it seems like there's a lot you need to know to get it right. And I feel like my head's already full of housing law, and I don't know if there's any room for anything else.
Well, a good piece of advice is be a commercial landlord, then you're not responsible for repair, maintenance costs and all that kind of stuff. No families you're going to put out in the street. I
mean, and the thing is, I don't do commercial tenancies at all, but I've had to dip my toe a little bit, and amazed, like obviously the forfeiture where you can just go and change the locks. It's such a strange world to me that just seems so alien and weird that you should be able to do that.
I think as well, like property, it's a huge umbrella, and when you're not in it, when you actually enter that world and you realise all the different strategies. And so I was talking to people about the event last night, and a lot of them were kind of at the start of their journey, and they've got no idea what direction to go in. And I was like, just start with one thing, and try that for a certain amount of time. Like, it's so easy to get swayed into what everybody else is doing, and seeing what everybody else is doing and go, oh, I should do that, but that might work better for them and the type of person that they are and the type of way that they work. Whereas, like, they might be great at HMOs, but you actually might be so much better in a flip situation that's maybe way more suited to you and your kind of skill set, and, you know, the way that you think and the way that you plan. So I think it's one of the difficult parts of getting in with people in your industry, because you see what everybody else is doing and it can give you that imposter syndrome and feeling like you're not there. But I think the most important thing about getting out and meeting people and doing that networking is, you know, there are so many questions that can be answered in a room full of people that you wouldn't even know, because it's not your kind of skill set. And that is, you always come out feeling like you've learned something, and also having those people that you can then have that comfortability with to actually reach out to and go, what the hell were you talking about? Like, I can't, like, please explain this to me. Let's actually talk about it.
And I need things explaining in quite simple language, especially when it comes to property and tax and stuff like that. I hate it.
Because sometimes as well, you're going into like a boardroom, and the language that people use, they might as well be speaking in a completely different language to you. And sometimes you do just need someone to say, this is a simplified, black and white, these are the steps that you need to follow, this is what you need to do, and this is why you need to do it. And I feel like there needs to be more of that in the industry, well, in any industry.
Well,
because so many people will nod along and pretend they know what you're saying, and they don't. And actually, they just need it put in plainly for them, and it's so much more helpful as well.
Although I think a lot of these people, if you start, including lawyers, if you started trying to explain it very simply, then I might be out of a job, because you know, like, you know, that's for me, that's what a specialism is. It's understanding another language that nobody else understands, and that's why people need you to do it, 100%. Because you do understand it.
Well, lucky for you, we always tell everybody you have to get a team of people around you. There's no point in learning how to do conveyancing, learning how to go to university just so you can buy one property. So getting that good team around you of advisors is the ideal scenario.
I think I want to hire one person that understands all of that, and then I can just give them my money and they can go and sort it out.
Well, that way, at least then it gives you time. The whole point in being in property is to become financially free, to then not need to go to work, then to spend time with family and friends and holiday everywhere. But what happens is a lot of people get into it and then say, oh, now I have to renovate properties, and then I have to do this, and they have to become a builder, and then they have to do all these things. And they actually get more work than they were wanted in the first place, and get away from that end goal.
And the team thing as well, it's about having that team of people around you means that you can really align with your expertise, and you can continue to be the expert in your area. It's opening up to other people to be part of that. So obviously with us, like with what we do with Property Legacy, I'm not a property expert. I'm learning all the time, but you're not a social media expert. We cross over all the time, and that's the nice part of it. You kind of have each other to lean on and go, you know, like when we are property networking, the amount of people I have conversations with, and I just say to them, I don't know the answer to that question, but Steve is over there. Like, you go and ask him. And it's the way it works both ways. So that is the nice thing about having a team around you. You don't have to go and learn all these things. You just find people that are assets to you that are going to help that growth, and then kind of run with it.
I am a bit jealous of the people at the networking who have a partner who they're doing it with. But if I start talking property to my husband, his eyes just glaze over, do you know what I mean? So I think I keep kind of wishing that he was into it, because then I feel like, you know, that could be his thing, and I could keep doing what I do, and then, you know, we could sort of meet in the middle.
It's like accountability as well, isn't it? You need that accountability.
Yeah, definitely, and I don't have that.
I think it can be a bit of a two-edged sword if it's a couple doing it. You got one that's not interested and then doesn't want to put any money at risk.
Yeah.
And the other person is like wanted to get going and getting held back. And so it just depends on the way you do it.
Yeah. I mean, certainly my husband's like, do what you want. He's not, you know, but he's just not interested in doing it with me. That's the only thing.
Just sell him the end result.
Well, yeah, he's more than happy with that. Yeah. I mean, but he, you know, it's like even when I wanted to go self-employed, I mean, I do love that. You know, he's very supportive. He's, you know, he didn't have any doubt that we'd be on the breadline, you know, whereas I was like, oh.
It is a scary thing to do.
Yes.
That final jump.
Yeah, it was.
When you step off that job.
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
And then you think, 6 months later, you're thinking, well, what was all the fuss about?
I know, but I nearly changed my mind so many times. Because when I left private practice, I had to work 6 months' notice. It was such a long time to be like, you know, is it going to work? Is it not going to work? Yeah.
So what's the future for yourself?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm very much hoping that we might be able to start tapping into the housing association work. A lot of it is, they're massive organisations, so you have to tender for the work. So we've just submitted, as Bexley Beaumont, our first social housing tender. So fingers crossed we can get that one under our belt, and then we can see, because of the way we're set up, everybody's like an individual, but we can still come together as a team to offer all the various different heads, because social landlords don't just tender for their housing work, like their employment work, their HR stuff, you know, things like that all needs to be included, procurement and development of land and things like that. So that's things that other colleagues do. So it's been really nice to put us all together a little bit, you know. But the beauty of the setup is there's no paralegals, there's no, you know, well, there are, but when you're dealing with a case, you will always get a partner level person, because everybody at Bexley Beaumont is a partner pretty much. We don't have many like associate solicitors or anything like that. So that's the beauty of this model, is that you'll get somebody who's highly experienced in their area of law.
Good. Yeah. Excellent.
So in terms of the type of work that you do and the people you want to work with, if somebody wanted to work with you, or if you're looking to kind of expand your clients, what type of people would you like to work with, and how can they get in contact with you?
Yes, so a lot of my work comes to me from Facebook, and Landlord UK forum is a particular one, and then other forums as well. But I obviously do a lot of work with estate agents who have landlords on their books and might need to direct their landlord when they're having a difficult tenant to me to work with. But yeah, otherwise just private landlords really. So if you want to get in touch with me, the best way to do that is via email at sarahsavage@bexleybeaumont.com, or if you want to ring me, you can do that on 0782 555 4148. Thanks a lot.
And all of that information will be down below the description if you want to contact Sarah. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's been great. Thank you very much.
So that's the end of today's episode. The Property Legacy podcast will bring you another episode in another couple of weeks.
To support Property Legacy, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, and we've got a brand new website. You can go on there and find out more about your hosts, how to get involved with the podcast, and any future events that we may be involved in as well. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Please like, subscribe, and give us some reviews and feedback on what you want to see on future episodes. Thank you so much for supporting us, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye. Bye.